The airport terminal lights felt like interrogation lamps, and the passport in Rebecca's trembling hands felt like a death warrant. She didn't want his money or his protection. She wanted her baby to have a chance at normal. But Rebecca knew that running from a man like Kim meant she wasn't just escaping a dangerous employer. She was fleeing from the father who would burn the world down to find them. Freedom is 30 feet away. Kim appears, burgundy shirt, calm devastation on his face. His hand reaches for her belly.
"You're carrying my blood, Rebecca. That means I can't let you go."
She's running from the only man who can keep them alive. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I have missed you all, missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. So stick around. I need your support on YouTube now more than ever. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now, back to the story. The pregnancy test felt heavier than it should have as Rebecca stared at the 2 pink lines in the cramped servant's bathroom. Her hands trembled against the white porcelain sink, the expensive marble cold beneath her fingertips. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not with him. Outside the door, the mansion hummed with its usual morning rhythm. The head housekeeper barking orders, the chef preparing Kim's breakfast, the security detail changing shifts with military precision. Rebecca pressed her palm against her still flat stomach and felt the walls closing in. It had started 6 months ago, on a night when the mansion was empty except for the 2 of them. Kim had returned late from business, blood on his knuckles, exhaustion carved into his beautiful face. She'd been cleaning his study, and when their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. He was supposed to be untouchable. She was supposed to be invisible. But loneliness recognizes itself, and that night they crossed every line that separated master from maid, employer from employee, the powerful from the powerless. The stolen moments that followed were reckless and intoxicating. Late nights in his private quarters, his hands gentle in ways that contradicted everything she knew about him. Whispered conversations in the dark, where he was just Kim and she was just Rebecca. But she'd always known it was temporary. Men like him didn't keep women like her. They used them and moved on. Now, staring at the test, Rebecca knew exactly what she had to do: disappear. She had savings, enough for a bus ticket to Atlanta where her cousin lived. She could start over, raise this baby far away from Kim's dangerous world, from the guns hidden in every room, from the men who visited in the dead of night, speaking in languages she didn't understand. This baby deserved normal. It deserved safe. That evening, she found Kim in his private office, city lights glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. He looked up from his paperwork, and for a moment, she saw the man who'd held her like she mattered. She forced the words out. "I'm pregnant, and I'm leaving. Tonight. I'll resign quietly. You'll never hear from me again." The silence stretched thin and dangerous. Kim stood slowly, his expression unreadable. "You're not going anywhere." "Kim, please." "This isn't a negotiation, Rebecca." His voice was soft, lethal. He pressed the intercom. "Move Miss Rebecca's belongings to the East Guest Suite immediately. Assign her a security detail. No one enters or exits without my authorization." Within an hour, she was relocated to a room 3 times the size of her quarters, her few possessions looking lost in the luxury. 2 guards appeared outside her door. Rebecca confronted him in the hallway, her voice shaking with fury and fear. "I'm not your prisoner, Kim." He stepped close, his hand hovering near her stomach but not touching, his dark eyes burning with something between obsession and terror. "No," he said quietly, "you're the mother of my child. That makes you far more valuable." He walked away, leaving her standing in the gilded cage he'd built in less than an hour. The door unlocked, but escape already impossible. 2 weeks of suffocating luxury had passed when Kim's driver escorted Rebecca to her first prenatal appointment. She sat in the back of the armored SUV, watching Dallas blur past tinted windows, 2 security guards flanking her like she was transporting state secrets. The clinic was in a quiet medical complex, the kind of place that catered to wealthy patients who valued discretion. Kim had chosen it personally. She hated that he was making these decisions for her, hated that she'd already grown accustomed to the surveillance, the guards, the loss of autonomy that came with carrying his child. The waiting room was peaceful, decorated in soft blues and whites, classical music playing overhead. Rebecca checked in under a false name Kim had provided, her stomach churning with resentment. The nurse called her back, and she was halfway through explaining her medical history when the world exploded. The window shattered inward with a deafening crack. Glass sprayed across the examination room like deadly rain. Rebecca's scream caught in her throat as something whistled past her head and embedded itself in the wall behind the doctor. Before she could process what was happening, a body slammed into her. One of Kim's guards tackling her to the linoleum floor, his weight crushing the air from her lungs. Another guard returned fire through the broken window, the gunshots impossibly loud in the small space. People were screaming. The doctor was on the floor, hands over her head. And all Rebecca could think was, "The baby, the baby, the baby." "Stay down," the guard shouted, his body still shielding hers as chaos erupted around them. More security poured into the room. Someone was barking orders in Korean. Rebecca's ears rang, her hands instinctively clutching her stomach, checking for blood, for pain, for any sign that she'd lost what she wasn't even sure she wanted to keep. The danger passed as quickly as it had come. The sniper had fled. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Kim arrived within minutes, bursting through the clinic door with a barely controlled fury that made even his own men step back. He found Rebecca still on the floor, shaking, a paramedic checking her vitals. His face went gray when he saw her. "The baby?" His voice cracked. "Heartbeat is strong," the paramedic said. "She's in shock, but physically unharmed." Kim pulled her up, his hands framing her face, searching her eyes with an intensity that felt like drowning. "Are you hurt? Tell me." She shoved him away, rage finally breaking through the trauma. "This is exactly why I can't stay. You brought this danger to us. Your world almost killed our baby." He didn't flinch. "Rival cartels know about you. They know about the pregnancy. This wasn't random, Rebecca. This was a message meant for me. Then let me go. Let me disappear where they can't find me. The danger exists whether you're with me or not." His voice was cold, factual, devastating. "But with me, you have protection. Without me, you're defenseless." Back at the mansion, he spread surveillance photographs across his desk like a dealer showing his hand. Rebecca's blood turned to ice. There were photos of her mother's house across town, time-stamped from the past week. Unknown men in cars parked across the street. A man following her younger brother to his community college. Her cousin's apartment building in Atlanta, circled in red. "They've been watching your family for 10 days, Kim said quietly. "If you run to them, you bring this to their doorstep. If you run alone, they'll find you within 48 hours. There is no escape, Rebecca. There's only survival." She sank into a chair, the full weight of her prison finally settling on her shoulders. Running wouldn't make her safe, but staying felt like slow suffocation, like trading one death for another. That night, Kim transformed the mansion's east wing into a medical suite, complete with ultrasound equipment and a hospital bed. He hired an obstetrician nurse named Maria to live on site, available 24 hours. Every decision made without asking her. Every comfort offered like a chain wrapped in silk. Rebecca lay awake in her luxurious room, listening to guards patrol the hallway, and began planning her first real escape. Because if she was going to die, it would be on her terms, not his. The mansion was quietest at 3 a.m. That dead hour when even Kim's security detail grew complacent, when the night shift guards nodded off in their chairs and the cameras felt less like omniscient eyes. Rebecca had been planning this for 3 days, timing the patrols, memorizing the blind spots, watching the way the guard at the servants' entrance disappeared for exactly 7 minutes every night to smoke. She'd packed light, a small duffel with clothes, her grandmother's Bible, the envelope of cash she'd been saving for 2 years, and the ultrasound photo she couldn't bring herself to leave behind. She moved like a ghost through the darkened hallways, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain it would wake everyone. The servants' entrance was unlocked, just as she'd hoped. The smoker guard was nowhere in sight. She slipped through, into the cool Dallas night, and ran. Not toward the main gate where cameras tracked every movement, but through the garden, over the back wall where the ivy grew thick enough to climb, dropping onto the sidewalk beyond with a jarring thud that sent pain shooting through her ankles. She was 3 months pregnant now, just barely showing, but her body already felt foreign, slower, more vulnerable. The Greyhound station downtown was a fluorescent cathedral of desperate people and broken dreams. Rebecca bought her ticket to Atlanta with cash, hands shaking as she passed the bills through the bulletproof glass. The clerk barely looked at her, just another black woman running from something. In 90 minutes, she'd be on that bus. In 12 hours, she'd be at her cousin Tasha's apartment, far enough away that maybe, just maybe, Kim's reach wouldn't extend. She boarded at 4:47 a.m., chose a window seat near the back, row 7, and finally allowed herself to breathe. The bus smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee and possibility. As the engine rumbled to life and Dallas began to slide past her window, Rebecca felt the first genuine hope she'd experienced in weeks. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red, beautiful in their growing distance. She was doing it. She was actually escaping. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A single text from Kim. "Window seat, row 7. I see you." The blood drained from her face. She looked out the window and her heart stopped. A black SUV was pacing the bus on the highway, matching its speed exactly, close enough that she could see the silhouette in the back seat. Kim, just sitting there, watching her. 20 minutes outside Dallas, red and blue lights flooded the bus. A police cruiser forced them to pull over, and Rebecca's stomach dropped. "Random inspection," the officer announced, boarding with 2 other men who were very clearly not police. They were Kim's security, badges clipped to their belts like props in a play. She watched him walk down the aisle toward her, his burgundy shirt untucked, his face carved from stone. He didn't say a word, just sat down beside her in the empty seat, his presence suffocating in the small space. The bus driver made an announcement about delays, apologized to passengers, and everyone settled back into uncomfortable waiting. Except Rebecca knew they weren't waiting for an inspection. They were waiting for her to surrender. Kim's hand found hers in the darkness between seats. Not rough, not demanding, just there, immovable. "Let's go," he said quietly, his voice devoid of anger, which somehow made it worse. The drive back to the mansion was silent. Kim's jaw clenched so tightly she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. But his hand never left hers, his thumb occasionally stroking across her knuckles in a gesture so tender it felt like violence. When they arrived, he walked her inside, past the guards who wouldn't meet her eyes, up the stairs to her room. Finally he spoke, and his voice was raw, destroyed. "You want to kill our baby? Because that's what running accomplishes. You saw what happened at the clinic. They're hunting you, Rebecca. Every second you're outside my protection, you're a target. And if they get to you," his voice broke. He turned away, hands running through his hair. "If they get to you, they'll cut that child out of you just to hurt me. Is that the freedom you want? Is that worth your pride?" Rebecca sank onto the bed, the truth of his words crushing the last of her defiance. She'd made it 40 miles in a world that stretched thousands, and he'd found her in minutes, as easily as plucking a flower from a garden he owned. She was never leaving, not alive, not with his baby in her belly. The door closed softly as Kim left, and she heard the lock click from the outside. Not for the first time, but this time she understood. The lock wasn't keeping her in. It was keeping the world out, and she didn't know which was worse. The morning after her failed escape, Kim summoned Rebecca to his office. She went because she had no choice, her body still aching from the climb over the wall, her spirit bruised from the humiliation of being caught so easily. He stood at his desk with files spread before him, crime scene photos she wished she hadn't seen, and a map of Dallas marked with red circles like targets. Los Zetas, he said without preamble, pointing to a photo of men she didn't recognize. A faction broke off 6 months ago, trying to muscle into my territory. They've been unsuccessful, so now they're changing tactics. He slid another photo toward her, a young woman, throat cut, dumped in an alley. This was the girlfriend of my lieutenant, 3 months pregnant. They sent her back in pieces as a warning. Rebecca's hand instinctively moved to her own stomach, bile rising in her throat. If they can't kill me directly, they'll kill my heir, Kim continued, his voice flat, factual, devastating. They'll torture you first, make sure I know it's happening, then they'll eliminate any trace of my bloodline. This isn't about you, Rebecca. You're collateral damage in a war you didn't start. But you're in it now, whether you accept it or not. She wanted to scream that she didn't ask for this, that he had no right to trap her in his nightmare. But the words died in her throat because the nightmare was real, documented in the photographs scattered across his desk like evidence of her future. The mansion became her entire world. No visitors were allowed. Her phone was replaced with one that only called pre-approved numbers. Kim, the nurse, emergency services. Guards stood at every door, rotated shifts every 6 hours, watched her with blank professional faces that made her feel like an object being warehoused. She had everything, a room larger than her mother's entire house, clothes that cost more than she used to make in a month, food prepared by a private chef, and nothing. No freedom, no privacy, no life beyond these walls. She stopped eating out of spite, refused to speak to Kim when he checked on her, turned her face to the wall when he entered her room. It was childish and she knew it, but it was the only power she had left. By the 4th day, Maria the nurse warned him that Rebecca's weight was dropping, that stress and malnutrition could harm the baby. That night, everything changed. Kim appeared at her door at 7 p.m. with grocery bags and an expression she'd never seen before: uncertainty. He moved past her into the sweets kitchenette and began unpacking ingredients: gochujang, doijang, fresh vegetables she couldn't name. "You need to eat," he said simply, and started cooking. She watched from the doorway, confused and angry, as this man who commanded killers with a word fumbled with measuring spoons and a recipe pulled up on his phone. The smell of kimchi jjigae began filling the room, spicy and comforting and completely unexpected. When he plated the stew with rice and placed it before her, his hands were shaking slightly. "It's not perfect," he admitted, "but my mother used to make this." Before she left, Rebecca stared at the food, at this strange offering of vulnerability, and, despite herself, she ate. It was good, better than good, and she hated that it mattered. The awkward domesticity continued. She'd find him in the sitting area of her suite reading What to Expect When You're Expecting, his brow furrowed in concentration, highlighting passages with a seriousness that would have been funny if it weren't so bizarre. He started bringing her food regularly: bulgogi, japchae, soft rice cakes, adjusting recipes when she mentioned the spice was too much for her morning sickness. He never demanded gratitude, never used it as leverage, just cooked and left, and came back the next day. One night, Rebecca woke to the sound of soft Korean words. She kept her eyes closed, listening. Kim was sitting in the chair beside her bed, his hand resting lightly on her stomach where the smallest swell had begun to show. He was talking to the baby, his voice gentle in a way she'd never heard, the unfamiliar syllables rising and falling like a lullaby. "What are you saying to her?" she asked quietly, breaking the pretense of sleep. Kim jerked back, caught, his face flushing with something that looked almost like shame. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, so softly she almost missed it, "I'm telling her about her grandmother, the one I never met." Rebecca sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around herself. "Your mother?" "She left when I was 5, walked out and never came back. I don't even remember her face clearly anymore, just fragments, the smell of her perfume, the way she sang when she cooked." He looked down at his hands. "I was telling our daughter that even though her grandmother made mistakes, even though she ran, maybe she had reasons, maybe she was trying to survive too." It was the first time Kim had acknowledged that Rebecca might have legitimate reasons for running, that her fear was rational, that maybe he was part of the problem. The crack in her armor widened, dangerous and inevitable. She reached out and took his hand, just for a moment, and let him rest it against her belly, where their daughter was growing, suspended between his violent world and her desperate need for something different. "Tell her something else," Rebecca whispered. "Tell her about the good things." And in the dim light of her gilded prison, Kim began to speak. Rebecca waited until Kim's guard was down, until the fragile domesticity between them felt almost real before she made her request. They were in the kitchen, Kim teaching her how to properly season bulgogi while she chopped vegetables with the expensive knife he'd handed her without hesitation, a trust that felt both significant and painful. "I want to see Shanice," she said, keeping her voice casual. "My best friend. I haven't talked to her in almost 2 months. She probably thinks I'm dead." Kim's hands stilled over the meat. "Rebecca, please." She set down the knife and turned to face him. "I'm going crazy in here, Kim. I need something normal. Just a few hours. Your men can drive me, watch the building. I don't care. I just need to see a familiar face that isn't holding a gun." She watched him calculate the risk, weigh her mental state against security protocols, search her face for deception. She kept her expression open, vulnerable, desperate enough to be believable. Because it was true, she did need to see Shanice, just not for the reasons he thought. 4 hours, he finally said. 2 guards stay with you. You don't leave her apartment. No phones except the one I gave you. "Thank you," Rebecca said, and meant it, even as guilt twisted in her stomach. Shanice's apartment in Oak Cliff was exactly as Rebecca remembered. Cramped, cluttered with thrift store furniture and framed photos of better times, smelling like the vanilla candles Shanice bulk bought from Dollar Tree. When her friend opened the door and saw Rebecca's growing belly, her jaw dropped. "Girl, what the hell happened to you?" They talked for hours while Kim's guards waited in the hallway like silent sentinels. Rebecca told her everything: the pregnancy, Kim's world, the assassination attempt, the gilded prison she'd been living in. Shanice listened with growing horror, her loyalty warring with common sense. "You need to get out," she finally said. "This is insane, Beck. He's keeping you hostage." "I know." Rebecca leaned forward, lowering her voice even though the guards couldn't hear through the door. "Help me disappear. Tonight. I'll slip out after they think I'm asleep. You drive me to the Mexican border. I know people in Juarez. I can cross, get lost where Kim's network can't reach." "You're really doing this?" Shanice gripped her hand. Okay, I'm in. We leave at 3 a.m. That night, Rebecca lay on Shanice's lumpy couch, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and felt the first genuine sense of normalcy in months. No luxury, no guards inside the room with her, just 2 friends planning an escape like they were 21 again, broke and fearless, and certain the world couldn't touch them. She almost let herself believe it would work. At 2:17 a.m., the window exploded. The firebomb came through the living room in an arc of flame and broken glass, igniting Shanice's curtains instantly. Rebecca's scream caught in her throat as fire spread across the cheap carpet with terrifying speed. Shanice was yelling her name from the bedroom, smoke already choking the small apartment. Rebecca stumbled toward her friend's voice, her eyes burning, her lungs screaming for clean air. The front door crashed inward. Kim's guards burst through, one grabbing Rebecca bodily and throwing her over his shoulder, the other dragging Shanice out as flames consumed the apartment behind them. They made it to the parking lot as the entire unit became an inferno, other residents pouring out in their pajamas, sirens wailing in the distance. Shanice collapsed on the asphalt, coughing violently, staring at the destruction of everything she owned. When she looked at Rebecca, her eyes held pure terror and rage. "Get away from me!" she scrambled backward. "You brought this to my door. They tried to kill us because of you. Get the fuck away from me, Rebecca!" "Shanice, please!" Rebecca reached for her, tears streaming down her soot-covered face. "Don't touch me! Don't ever contact me again! You're poison!" Shanice was sobbing now, paramedics trying to check her vitals while she thrashed. "I could have died! You almost got me killed!" Kim arrived as the fire trucks were dousing the flames, his SUV screeching to a halt, his face a mask of controlled fury. He took in the scene, the burning building, Rebecca shaking and covered in ash, Shanice being loaded into an ambulance, still screaming accusations. He walked to Rebecca slowly, pulled off his jacket, and wrapped it around her shoulders. "This is what I've been protecting you from," he said quietly, his hand cupping the back of her neck, forcing her to look at the destruction. "This is what happens when you step outside my reach. They knew you were here within an hour. They don't care about collateral damage, Rebecca. They'll burn down the whole block just to send me a message." Rebecca couldn't speak, couldn't defend herself, couldn't even cry anymore. She'd destroyed her best friend's life, nearly gotten them both killed, all for a freedom that was never real to begin with. Anyone who helped her became a target. Anyone who loved her became a weapon pointed at Kim's heart. She was a plague, a curse, a walking death sentence to everyone she touched outside those mansion walls. The ride back was silent. Kim didn't gloat, didn't lecture, didn't even seem angry, just tired, bone-deep exhausted. When they arrived, he walked her to her room, checked that she wasn't injured, and left without a word. Rebecca sat on her bed, smelling like smoke and failure, and finally understood. She wasn't fighting Kim anymore. She was fighting reality. And reality had just shown her exactly how much power she didn't have. She curled around her belly, around the daughter who was the reason for all this violence, and grieved the friendship she'd murdered with her desperate, stupid hope. By 6 months, Rebecca's pregnancy could no longer be hidden or denied. Her belly swelled prominently beneath the expensive maternity clothes Kim had ordered without asking her size, somehow getting it exactly right. The baby was active now, kicking at odd hours, pressing against Rebecca's ribs with what felt like tiny fists demanding space. She'd stopped planning escapes after Shanice, stopped fighting the guards, the surveillance, the suffocating safety. She simply existed, suspended in the strange limbo between captivity and protection, waiting for a future she couldn't imagine. Kim attended every ultrasound appointment at the private clinic he'd essentially bought out for her exclusive use. He memorized the measurements, femur length, head circumference, estimated weight, reciting them like prayer. When the doctor spread gel across Rebecca's belly and pointed to the screen, announcing definitively, "It's a girl," Kim's hand found Rebecca's and squeezed so tightly it hurt. His face remained impassive, but she felt the tremor run through him, saw the way his jaw clenched against emotion too large to contain. "A daughter," he said later, driving them back to the mansion, his voice carefully neutral. "I don't know how to raise a daughter." "You don't know how to raise any child," Rebecca replied, but without venom, just truth. "No," he agreed quietly, "I don't." The months of forced proximity had softened the sharp edges between them. worn down her resistance through sheer exhaustion and the undeniable reality that he was present in ways she'd never expected. He read pregnancy books obsessively, asked the obstetrician nurse questions that made Maria smile with poorly hidden amusement, reorganized his entire security protocol around Rebecca's prenatal care schedule. He was suffocating and devoted in equal measure, and Rebecca hated how much she'd begun to depend on his consistency. Late one night, unable to sleep with the baby performing acrobatics against her organs, Rebecca wandered to the mansion's kitchen. She found Kim already there, making tea, his shirt untucked and hair cheveled in a way that made him look younger, almost vulnerable. He poured her a cup without asking, chamomile the way she liked it, and they sat at the marble island in comfortable silence. "What kind of life can we give her, Kim?" Rebecca finally asked, both hands cradling her belly. "One where her mother is a prisoner? Where she grows up thinking this is normal?" "One where her mother is alive," Kim said simply, meeting her eyes. "That's the only life that matters. Everything else we can figure out. But if you're dead, if she's dead, there's nothing to build." "That's not enough." "I know." He turned his teacup slowly, watching the liquid swirl. "I was abandoned when I was 8, in Seoul, outside a subway station. My mother left me there with a note that said she couldn't do it anymore. The streets raised me. Then the gangs found me, fed me, gave me purpose." His voice was flat, reciting facts. "I killed my first man when I was 15. He was trying to recruit me to a rival faction. My boss said it was him or me, handed me a knife, and I chose me. I've been choosing me ever since." Rebecca's breath caught. She'd known Kim was dangerous, had seen evidence of the violence he commanded, but hearing him speak it so plainly, a child turned killer, a boy with no one, cracked something open in her chest. "I never had a family, Rebecca. You two are it. I don't know how to do this without control. Control kept me alive. Control built everything I have. But I see what it's doing to you, and His voice broke. "I don't know another way." "Then learn," Rebecca said softly, reaching across the space between them to cover his hand with hers. "Because control isn't love, Kim. Control is fear wearing a crown. Our daughter deserves better than your fear." He looked at their joined hands like he was seeing a miracle. "What should we name her?" The shift in conversation was deliberate, a retreat from vulnerability too raw to sustain, but Rebecca let him have it. "You'll want something Korean." "I want something that honors both of us," Kim corrected. "Something that says she belongs to both worlds." They spent the next hour trading names, writing them on napkins, saying them aloud to test how they sounded. Rebecca wanted something hopeful, something that promised her daughter might have a different life. Kim wanted something strong, something that would remind their child she came from survivors. Finally, Rebecca said, "Hope, Jin. Hope for what she represents to us. Jin, because it means precious in Korean." Kim repeated it slowly, tasting each syllable. "Hope, Jin." His eyes met Rebecca's, and for the first time since she'd told him about the pregnancy, she saw something beyond possessiveness or duty. She saw wonder. "It's perfect." The kiss happened without planning, without the desperate hunger of their first encounters. Kim leaned across the counter, his hand cupping her face, with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him, and pressed his lips to hers. It was soft, questioning, tender in a way that made Rebecca's chest ache. She kissed him back, tasting chamomile and uncertainty, and something dangerously close to trust. When they pulled apart, Rebecca kept her forehead against his, eyes closed, feeling the baby kick between them like a reminder of what was at stake. For the first time in months, she felt something other than fear or resentment. She felt hope, dangerous, foolish, fragile hope, that maybe they could build something real from the wreckage of how they'd started. That maybe her prison could become a home, and her captor could become something more. It was terrifying how much she wanted to believe it.
Rebecca woke to shouting. Not the usual controlled communication of Kim's security detail, but genuine alarm. Voices raised, boots pounding through hallways, the metallic click of weapons being loaded. She was 7 months pregnant now, Hope Jin pressing heavily against her bladder, her body ungainly and slow. She struggled out of bed and opened her door to find guards running past, radios crackling with urgent Korean. Maria appeared, her face pale. "Stay in your room, lock the door, don't come out until Mr. Kim tells you." "What's happening?" "Just stay inside." The nurse disappeared down the hallway, and Rebecca's blood turned cold. She dressed quickly, her heart racing, and pressed her ear to the door. Fragments of conversation filtered through. Los Zetas made their move. 3 of our warehouses hit simultaneously. This is war. Rebecca's hands instinctively covered her belly. War. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. She crept down the hallway toward Kim's office, staying in the shadows, and heard his voice through the cracked door. "If they breach the compound, eliminate all liabilities. I want nothing left for them to leverage." Liabilities. The word echoed in her mind. Did that include her? Include Hope Jin? She backed away slowly, panic rising like bile. Kim had always promised to protect them, but if his back was against the wall, if keeping them alive became more dangerous than eliminating the threat. She made it back to her room, mind racing. This was it, the final window. Everyone was distracted, focused on the external threat. She had to leave now, or she'd never get another chance. "Maria," she called when the nurse checked on her an hour later. "I need to pick up a prescription. The pharmacy called. My iron supplements are ready." The guard assigned to drive her looked exhausted, distracted by the chaos. He barely questioned it, just escorted her to the armored SUV and drove to the pharmacy near the medical complex. Rebecca went inside, pretended to wait at the counter, then slipped through the employee area when the pharmacist's back was turned and out the emergency exit into the alley. She ordered an Uber with shaking hands, gave an address 3 blocks away, and made it to DFW Airport by noon. With cash Kim didn't know she'd hidden, she bought a ticket to London, the first international flight available, the farthest she could run. She made it through security, her pregnant belly drawing sympathetic looks from TSA agents who waved her through quickly. Gate 47, boarding in 20 minutes. Rebecca sat in the waiting area, both hands on her stomach, trying to calm her racing heart. Hope Jin was kicking frantically, like she could sense her mother's terror, her little body thrashing against Rebecca's ribs. "It's okay, baby," Rebecca whispered. "We're going somewhere safe, somewhere he can't follow." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Nowhere was safe. Nowhere was far enough. Final boarding call for Flight 2847 to London Heathrow. Rebecca stood on trembling legs and walked toward the gate, her boarding pass clutched in one hand, her small bag in the other. She was 10 feet from the agent scanning passes when a hand touched her shoulder. She knew before she turned around, knew from the gentle weight of his palm, from the way the air shifted around her. Kim stood there, and he looked destroyed. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, his eyes red-rimmed like he'd been crying or hadn't slept in days, maybe both. "Please," he said, his voice raw and broken. "Please, don't do this." "Kim," her voice cracked, tears already streaming down her face. "I know you're scared. I know I brought this to you. But please, Rebecca, don't leave me." Security was watching now, other passengers pausing to witness the scene. Rebecca saw their judgment, their curiosity, their discomfort at this public unraveling. She saw everything she was throwing away: safety, resources, the father of her child. And everything she was running toward: uncertainty, solitude, the impossible task of raising Hope Jin alone while being hunted. "I can't watch you die, Kim," she sobbed. "I can't let her watch you die. This war will kill you, and it will kill us too. Let me go. Let us have a chance at normal." Kim dropped to his knees in the middle of the airport terminal, his hand reaching for her belly where Hope Jin kicked frantically. Then give me a reason to survive," he said, looking up at her with naked desperation. "Stay. Be my reason. Both of you." People were staring, security was approaching, and Rebecca felt something inside her break. Not her resolve, but something deeper. The fantasy that she could outrun this, that love and danger could be separated, that her daughter's father kneeling before her in public surrender meant anything less than total commitment. "I can't let you go, Kim," she sobbed. "I can't let her watch you die. This war will kill you, and it will kill us too. Let me go. Let us have a chance at normal." Kim dropped to his knees in the middle of the airport terminal, his hand reaching for her belly where Hope Jin kicked frantically. Then give me a reason to survive," he said, looking up at her with naked desperation. "Stay. Be my reason. Both of you." People were staring, security was approaching, and Rebecca felt something inside her break. Not her resolve, but something deeper. The fantasy that she could outrun this, that love and danger could be separated, that her daughter's father kneeling before her in public surrender meant anything less than total commitment. "I can't let you go," Kim whispered, his forehead pressed against her belly. "Not because I own you, because I love you, both of you. Please, Rebecca, please." She opened her mouth to respond, to say something, she didn't even know what, when warmth flooded down her legs. Rebecca looked down in confusion at the puddle spreading across the airport floor, at Kim's stricken face as he realized what was happening. "My water just broke," she said numbly. "Kim, the baby, it's too early." Hope Jin was coming, 7 weeks premature, in the middle of an airport terminal, and Rebecca's desperate flight for freedom had just become a race for her daughter's life.
The ambulance screamed through Dallas traffic, sirens wailing, as Rebecca's contractions came hard and fast. Kim sat beside her, gripping her hand, his face a mask of barely controlled terror. "Stay with me," he kept saying, though she wasn't sure if he was talking to her or the baby. His phone was pressed to his ear, barking orders in Korean, mobilizing his private medical team, clearing the hospital, ensuring the entire maternity floor would be locked down and secured. The labor was brutal. 7 weeks early, Rebecca's body wasn't ready, and Hope Jin wasn't ready, and everything that could go wrong seemed determined to go wrong. Rebecca's blood pressure spiked to dangerous levels, preeclampsia threatening to shut down her organs. The baby's heart rate kept dropping, the monitors screaming alerts that sent nurses running. Through the haze of pain and epidural fog, Rebecca heard fragments. Possible emergency C-section, NICU team standing by. We might lose one or both. Kim was banished to the waiting room, his presence in the delivery room deemed too disruptive by the doctors, who didn't care that he owned half of Dallas. He paced like a caged animal, his security team forming a perimeter around him, their faces grim. For the first time in his adult life, Kim was completely powerless. All his money, all his influence, all his control meant nothing against the fragile biology of premature birth. He found himself praying to gods he didn't believe in, making bargains he had no authority to make. Take me instead. Take everything I've built. Just let them live. His hands shook as he pressed them against his face, and when his second-in-command tried to offer comfort, Kim shoved him away and broke. Just completely shattered in the antiseptic waiting room, surrounded by men who'd killed for him, crying like the abandoned 8-year-old boy he'd never stopped being. After 4 hours that felt like 4 years, the doctor emerged, still in surgical scrubs, her mask pulled down. Kim was on his feet instantly. "They're both stable," she said, and Kim's knees nearly buckled. "But it was close, Mr. Kim, very close. The baby is in the NICU, and Miss Rebecca will need monitoring, but they're fighters, both of them." Kim followed her on numb legs to the recovery room. Rebecca lay in the hospital bed, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, her face gray with exhaustion, but alive, breathing. Beside her bed was a clear incubator, and inside was the smallest human being Kim had ever seen. Hope Jin. 4 pounds of fragile life, tubes and wires covering her tiny body, a breathing apparatus over her nose and mouth, but her chest was rising and falling, rising, fighting. I almost killed her by running, Rebecca said hoarsely, tears streaming down her face as she looked at Kim. If I'd been on that plane when my water broke, if I'd been alone somewhere, she would have died. You saved her. Kim moved to the incubator, his hand hovering over the glass, afraid to touch anything. We saved her, he whispered, together. His finger traced the outline of his daughter's impossibly small hand. She's perfect, Rebecca. She's... The alarm cut through the moment like a blade. Kim's head of security burst through the door, weapon drawn. Breach. Hospital security cameras show armed men entering through the emergency department. Los Zetas, they traced you here. The words had barely registered when gunfire erupted in the corridor. Screams, the sharp crack of automatic weapons. Kim's men returned fire, forming a defensive line at Rebecca's door. Nurses were running, patients being evacuated, chaos consuming the maternity ward. Kim pulled his weapon from the holster concealed beneath his jacket and positioned himself at the door, his body a barrier between the violence and his family. Blood was seeping through his shirt from the shoulder wound he'd just taken, but he didn't falter. "Get down," he shouted to Rebecca. But Rebecca wasn't cowering. She was moving, pulling the NICU incubator behind the bed, using her own body to shield Hope Jin. Then she grabbed the room's chairs, the medical equipment stand, anything she could move, and began barricading the door. She found the room phone and dialed 911, her voice steady despite the terror. "Active shooter, maternity ward, officers down, we need SWAT immediately." She moved to the door where Kim stood, blood streaming down his arm, and met his eyes. "I'm not running anymore," she said. The assassins breached the floor. Kim's men were outnumbered, falling back, sustaining casualties. 3 cartel members made it to Rebecca's door, weapons raised. Kim fired, took down 2, but the third got off a shot that hit him in the shoulder, the same shoulder already bleeding. He staggered, but didn't fall, didn't retreat, just kept firing until the third man dropped. Police sirens filled the air. SWAT was storming the building. The remaining cartel members were being neutralized, arrested, killed. But Kim was swaying now, blood loss catching up to him. He tried to take a step and collapsed. Rebecca was there instantly, catching him, lowering him to the floor. "Don't you dare die on us," she said fiercely, pressing her hands to his wounds, trying to stop the bleeding. "Don't you dare, Kim. Hope Jin needs her father. I need..." Her voice broke. "I need you." Medical staff rushed in, taking over, loading Kim onto a gurney. As they wheeled him toward surgery, his eyes found Rebecca's one last time. "Keep her safe," he managed. "We'll keep each other safe," Rebecca replied. "All 3 of us. Together." 2 weeks after the hospital siege, Kim was released from medical care with his arm in a sling and strict orders to rest. Orders he ignored the moment he arrived to collect Rebecca and Hope Jin. The baby had defied every dire prediction, gaining weight steadily, breathing on her own, her tiny lungs stronger each day. When the NICU nurse placed Hope Jin in Rebecca's arms for the discharge, wrapped in a soft pink blanket, Rebecca felt the full weight of what they'd survived settle over her like a benediction. Kim's organization had moved with surgical precision in the aftermath. Los Zetas' faction was destroyed, key leaders eliminated, operations dismantled, territory absorbed. The retaliation was swift, absolute, and sent a clear message throughout the criminal underworld. Kim's family was untouchable. But something in Kim had fundamentally shifted. Rebecca saw it in the way he held Hope Jin with his good arm, in the careful gentleness he'd never shown before, in the exhaustion that went deeper than physical wounds. "I'm stepping back from active operations," he told her on the drive from the hospital, his eyes on the road, jaw set with determination. "My second can run things. I'll oversee from a distance, but I can't. I have something to live for now. I can't be reckless anymore."
Rebecca studied his profile, this man who'd imprisoned her and saved her in equal measure, and made her decision. "I'll stay," she said quietly. Hope Jin stirred against her chest, a warm weight of impossible love. "But on my terms, Kim." He pulled the car over, turned to face her fully. "Tell me." "No more mansion. I want a normal house in the suburbs where Hope Jin can have a yard, where neighbors aren't armed security. I make the decisions about her upbringing, schools, friends, activities. You tell me everything. No more secrets, no more surveillance I don't know about. And we get married, legally. Not for show or protection, but because we're choosing this. Choosing each other." Kim's eyes searched hers for a long moment. Then, simply, yes, to all of it. 3 months later, Rebecca stood in the kitchen of their modest home in Plano, stirring pasta sauce while evening light streamed through windows that overlooked an ordinary backyard with a swing set Kim had assembled himself, cursing in Korean the entire time. The house was a 3-bedroom ranch, unassuming and perfect, with a nursery painted soft yellow where Hope Jin, now nearly 8 pounds and thriving, slept in a crib surrounded by stuffed animals instead of security monitors. Kim walked in holding their daughter against his shoulder, murmuring to her in Korean, teaching her words she couldn't yet understand but would grow up knowing. "Sarang," he said softly. "Love." Hope Jin grabbed his finger with her tiny fist, and his entire face transformed with wonder that still hadn't faded. The doorbell rang, and Rebecca's heart jumped. Her mother. First visit since everything happened. Kim had extended the invitation himself, had promised Rebecca he would try, that family meant more than pride. Rebecca opened the door to find her mother standing there, uncertainty and hope warring on her face. "Mama," Rebecca said, and they embraced, months of worry dissolving in that moment. Kim approached with Hope Jin, and Rebecca watched her mother's eyes fill with tears at the sight of her granddaughter. He extended his hand formally. "Mrs. Johnson, thank you for raising the woman who saved my life. Please, come in." Dinner was awkward, the careful navigation of painful topics, the weight of judgment and acceptance battling across the table. But it was real. Rebecca's mother held Hope Jin, asked questions about the baby's schedule, offered advice Rebecca would actually consider. Kim answered her pointed questions honestly, didn't hide what he was, but showed her what he was trying to become. By dessert, the tension had eased into something tentatively hopeful. After her mother left, Rebecca and Kim sat on the back porch, baby monitor between them broadcasting Hope Jin's soft breathing, the Texas summer night alive with crickets and fireflies. Rebecca leaned against Kim's good shoulder, his arm wrapped around her, and felt something she'd never expected. Peace. "I never thought I'd say this," she admitted quietly, "but I'm glad you didn't let me go." Kim pressed his lips to her temple. "I never thought I'd have this. A home. Not a fortress. A home. Not a prison. A family." They watched fireflies dance across the yard, tiny points of light in the darkness. And Rebecca thought about the journey that had brought them here. The fear, the violence, the desperation, the surrender. None of it was simple. None of it was clean. But it was theirs. "She's going to have a better life than we did," Rebecca said, one hand resting on the monitor. "She already does," Kim replied, his voice thick with emotion. "She has both of us. Together. That's more than either of us ever had." The camera would pull back now if this were a movie, past the porch light glowing warm against the night, past the modest house with its simple yard, revealing a young family building something real from the wreckage of how they began. Not a fairy tale ending where everything was fixed and perfect, but a real ending. Messy, complicated, still touched by danger, still requiring daily choice. But honest. But theirs. But filled with a love that had been tested by fire and survived. Inside, Hope Jin stirred and made a small sound. Rebecca and Kim stood together, moving toward their daughter, toward the future they were choosing, with every breath. The mansion was gone, the prison was gone. What remained was harder and more precious. The daily work of becoming a family, of choosing love over fear, of building walls that protected rather than confined. Freedom, Rebecca had learned, was never about running. It was about finding someone worth staying for and having the courage to believe they'd meet you halfway.
If Rebecca and Kim's impossible love story proved that sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the right one, hit subscribe now. What do you think? Should Rebecca have kept running, or was staying the only way to truly be free? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.